Join us for lively discussion about the A-State community. Each week, we'll meet with a variety of faculty, staff, and students to discuss all things Arkansas State University. Live from the ASU-TV studios in the School of Media and Journalism, this is A-State Connections. And this is A-State Connections on KASU and ASU-TV. I'm Jonathan Reeves, News Director with KASU Public Radio and the host of A-State Connections, the radio show on KASU. Today we talk about Arkansas State University's student-run newspaper, the Herald. It turns 102 years old this year. Telling us about the history of the Herald and how it incorporates students at Arkansas State today is Associate Professor of Multimedia Journalism and Student Advisor to the Herald, Sandra Combs, and Editor-in-Chief of the Herald, Rebecca Robinson. Thank you both so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having us.
And I know that in the next segment, we will talk to the news editor, Rachel Rudd, so she'll be coming up in the second segment. First, tell us a little bit about yourself, Sandra, how you came to Arkansas State University.
I was teaching at Michigan State University, and then I got a job offer here, so I came. It's less snow, and I taught journalism at Michigan State, journalism for 6 years at Wayne State University, and prior to that I was a working journalist at newspapers for about 20 years.
Right, and so how was it transitioning over from being in the world of journalism to actually teaching journalism? Was that transition something that became easy to you?
It's easy now after about 20 years, but at the beginning it wasn't, because as a newspaper editor or reporter, you've got something to do every day. There are deadlines. But as a professor, you are teaching lessons maybe twice a week to a different group. So there wasn't that daily deadline.
Right. Was there something that you missed? Was the daily deadline?
I missed that, but the biggest thing I missed was election nights. You know,
Really?
You've worked the election nights.
I have worked it, yeah.
You learn the results first, and so I miss that, being in that newsroom, buzzing around.
It is so exhausting to do that, but at the same token, though, it is also, you get this big adrenaline rush to do
Absolutely.
that. Have you worked election night coverage?
Not really. I mean, I've been in the Herald when there's an election going on and stuff, and we've been watching it closely, but not as intense as like a daily or something like that.
It's coming. I'm sure. I'm sure your turn.
I'm excited.
Yeah, your turn's going to be taking place. So first of all, I wanted to ask you. Thank you, Rebecca, for joining us here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to Arkansas State, please.
Yeah, I'm from Sheridan, Arkansas, and I did yearbook there. I had a really awesome teacher, and he kind of pushed me into like journalism and stuff like that, and I knew that I wanted to continue doing that. I wanted to do yearbook the rest of my life, but you can't do that. And so he's like, Your next best stop is multimedia journalism, and A-State's really the only place to go in Arkansas, so go and do it. And I came here and toured, and I loved it, so I applied and got in.
How did you hear about the Herald?
I heard about the Herald through people. I had heard they were looking for a sports editor, which I knew wasn't really what I was good at, but I wanted to try it anyways because I had missed like doing things and writing and stuff.
Very good. So tell us about the Herald for people who may not know. Maybe they're watching this and they may not be familiar with Herald. Tell us about this.
The Herald is an inclusive, number one, student-run operation. We now have paper and online, and it's open to anybody. You can work for pay. We don't have a whole bunch of money, but you can volunteer. And the thing about it is that this weekly publication gives you the opportunity to develop some great communication skills.
And that was what I was going to lead to. Why should students consider working at a place like the Herald? How does it help them to develop some of those skills for whatever it is that they decide to do later in life?
Correct. One of the things that whatever profession you're in, you need to know how to write. You need to be able to communicate with people. You need to be able to ask questions and even investigate for information. Even if you are doing PR, you have to do research on your company that you are doing. So with journalism and with the Herald, you get to do all of that.
Right. Tell us about the the history of the Herald, and I know that's something we can maybe summarize a little bit, but over the 100 plus years, the Herald's had some huge stories that
Yeah.
it's broken.
In fact, I
and
brought
covered.
one that we're most famous for, ASU reality, when Arkansas State became a university. And not only did the newspaper break the news, and this is our most famous issue, but we broke it before TV and newspaper, Jonesboro Sun. In fact, it's a really interesting story to hear from Roy Olkert and Dr. Joel Gamble, who drove back typing on a typewriter the story that was coming out that next issue.
I'm holding this up because this looks better than my face does, but people get a chance to kind of take a look at that, and that is an amazing thing. Not only was it an amazing story, but when you think about it, was done in Little Rock. It happened there, and Roy Orkert and others. I don't
We're
know,
driving back,
were driving
literally
back
in the car with a flashlight on the typewriter.
and they beat all the other story or newspapers across the state
Exactly.
in leading coverage.
Exactly.
One of the things we talked about off air is the horrible circumstance that's been going on with Michigan State and what's been taking place. Tell us about the work that those students have been doing in covering that horrible story of the shooting.
It's incredible. The state news at Michigan State University is a student-run paper, just like the Herald, and they have a bigger staff than the Herald. But every day they have been producing 3, 4, 5 stories, including online products and including photos. The students at the state news can reach areas where somebody dropping in from the Lansing State Journal may not be able to go to. They know where Berkeley Hall is without even thinking about it. So,
Right.
and that's the benefit of having a local paper on campus like the Herald. If something's happening at Wilson Hall, our students will automatically know that it has something to do with NYIT, where somebody coming in from the Arkansas Dem Gazette, number one, may not know where Wilson Hall is, and therefore does not know that it's inhabited by NYIT.
Right. As editor-in-chief, what is your role at the Herald, Rebecca? How are you able to, well, I'll just leave it there. What is your role there and what do you do?
So I like to be there just to guide people and whatever they want to do. I like when people come to me and tell me like, this is my idea, and I like to help them get that idea out. And so I pretty much guide and teach them on how to go about those ways. And a big thing for me is getting them connected into who, and they're like the resources they need for that story, and just reading all of their stories and copy editing and just getting them where they need to be and where they want to be with their projects they're working on.
How many students are working that you're working with usually?
Right now we have about 14, and I would say we fluctuate between like 7 to 20 people depending on the semester.
So with that number of students, that's a great number of students that are there. How do you all, balance story ideas and, balance what's going to go into, because this is a weekly publication,
Correct.
right? So how do you all work that flow and make that all happen every week?
For me,
Starting on Monday.
yeah, it's really listening to what students want, not just like journalism students, but what the campus wants. What are they talking about? What do they want to know about? What events do they want to go to? And that's really how we balance it, is trying to figure out who cares and who wants to know about it.
Sandra, how do you advise students? How do you help them, as they're going through the weekly news grind? Because it can be a grind to be able to kind of go through everything. How do you help them as they're going through the process?
I am like my students who we read and listen to different things. I have a routine of listening to cable news, network news, reading the paper, getting alerts on my phone, and I encourage them to do the same thing. So many times I will say, hey, did you see that story about, or they will say, hey, did you hear, just like this week, there was a story about the drug things,
Oh, the Narcan boxes on campus now.
Right. And so Rebecca came in and she said, "Hey, Miss Combs, did you hear about this?" And I'm going, "No, I hadn't heard about it yet." And so we have those kinds of conversations with them.
Yeah, and those are the medical life-saving kits. Their boxes are all over campus, right?
Yeah, they hope to have them in around 50 locations, I believe.
That's fantastic. So these are stories that people may not, may not even know about that are going on, and of that, and even some things I would think that maybe we think we know about, maybe we really don't. We've heard about it, but we don't know all of the details of that. And that, why is this? Why are these? Why is it so important for our society, for people to be able to have newspapers around, to be able to have this? Why is it that we need this? Because, and I ask this in this context when we have to carry this over to the next segment. There's a lot of people who say the newspaper business is dying, or that we're seeing that it's just changing, from one thing to another. How important are newspapers in society today?
Well, I tend to think that I bleed newspaper ink. I've wanted to be a journalist since I was 5th grade. But it's important because newspapers, the news media, is the first draft of history. For instance, that ASUA reality is the first draft of ASU's university history. And without newspapers, and they're not dying, we're just changing platforms. More and more are having online access, paywalls, but anyway, more are going online. In fact, when something breaks here for the Herald, we put it online. We still have a newspaper weekly, but we put it online. It's just changing platforms. They're not dying.
Yeah, and I think that's fair for, we could say the same thing about radio. The radio's not dying, but now there's just other ways for people to be able to pick it up through apps, through phones, through computers, and all that stuff. So it's just a changing platform.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
very good. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll have more Associate Professor, Multimedia Journalism and Student Advisor to the Herald, Sandra Combs, as well as Rebecca Robinson, Editor-in-Chief of the Herald. In the next segment, we'll talk to Rachel Rudd, News Editor. We'll continue this conversation right after the break.
ASU-TV, shows like Red Wolf Roundtable, ASU-TV News, Westside Football, and more. Gain real-life experience while doing what you love. Get involved with ASU-TV today.
Red Wolf Radio is a student-led organization at Arkansas State University wanting to hear your takes on pop culture, music, the news, and college life. Just about anything you can think of. Located in the Education and Communications building on campus, we are always looking for more volunteers. So if you're an Arkansas State University student, no matter the major, and this is something that interests you, shoot us an email at redwolfradio@astate.edu. That's redwolfradio@astate.edu. Let them hear you how.
At Arkansas State, we want you to go. Go where learning soars, takes flight, and rockets ahead. Go for experiences, internships, and scholarships. We want you to go. Become A-State Maine. Are you ready to go? Go.astate.edu for details.
Live from the ASU-TV studios in the School of Media and Journalism, this is A-State Connections. And welcome back to A-State Connections on KASU and ASU-TV. I'm Jonathan Reeves, and joining me to talk about Arkansas State University's student-run newspaper, The Herald, is Associate Professor, Multimedia Journalism and Student Advisor to The Herald, Sandra Combs, along with News Editor Rachel Rudd, who's joining me now. So thanks so much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
for having me.
So, Rachel, I wanted to ask you about how you came to Arkansas State. Tell us a bit about yourself, please.
I've been involved in media and journalism since I was in ninth grade. I started on our news crew in high school, and then I eventually joined the yearbook staff. And I knew I just wanted to keep doing that because I loved every second of it. And so when I was researching colleges, I knew A-State had the best media program in the state. So I was like, well, guess that's where we're going. And that's how I ended up here. Started working for the Herald, and we're not looking back.
So, what was it about that just kind of, it's almost like you catch the bug. Like I caught the bug of radio 30 years ago, right? And so it's like you just don't ever get out of that. What was it about the first thing you're like, okay, this is what I want to do?
I think the biggest thing is really just getting to talk to so many people. You hear about so many interesting stories and so many people through media and journalism, and I think getting to tell that in the best way possible and in some very creative ways, I think is really what kept me going, because I've loved that ever since I was little. So that's really kind of my catching the bug, if you will.
News editor. How long have you been news editor?
I have been the news editor since I was a freshman. I started in my spring semester, and I've been here ever since.
Very good. So tell us about your job and what you do at the Herald.
So as news editor, I am in charge of the news pages. So there's front, and then there's also news and jump. And I tend to deal more with news and jump. Front is more Rebecca, and I'm just in charge of knowing what's going on A-State, what needs to be covered, what needs to go where on the pages, and how to best cover that.
Very good.
And campus crime.
Yes, and campus crime. We can't forget that.
Right. Sandra, how is it working with Rachel and also with Rebecca on the work that they do? I know they do a fantastic job. How is it like working with them?
Well, we had a wonderful weekend this past weekend. We went to the Southeast Journalism Conference in Thibodeau, Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And they came back with awards. So that in itself tells you what kind of staff we have. They work well together, and they feed off each other and give story ideas, and they're just dynamite. I hate when they graduate.
Yeah.
In fact, I've threatened to flunk a couple of them, but anyway.
Yeah, just to keep them around
Just to
is
keep
what
them
it
around,
is.
But
is it kind of like I guess like a program where you've got people like Rachel and Rebecca who are kind of training up the students, kind of like an internship program to be able to keep students going and keep this going for years?
Yeah, the goal is that they train those who will replace them. Sometimes, especially with, unfortunately, decline in enrollment across the nation, and even at A-State, there are not enough people to fill in the blank. We always need people who are willing to sell advertising. We always need photographers. But the goal is that they train others to follow them.
Right. Tell us about some of the stories you all are working on and some of the things that are taking place, and I'll let you, Rachel, talk about this.
So for this week, I've got about 3 that I'm working on. Rebecca and I are going to be working on one about the opioid rescue kits across campus, and then since there is, and then kind of switching gears a bit, since there is a nationwide Adderall shortage, I'm wanting to talk to the A-State community, see how that's affecting students. And then the other one I'm working on is I'm wanting to do a feature story over Jaden Flanagan. He raps a lot, and I just think that would be a very interesting feature, and I know it's kind of a family ordeal for him, so those are kind of the 3 I'm working on this week.
Yeah, and your thoughts on these stories?
Last week, well, I'm really excited about the medical things being placed around campus. But last week they did the Blackboard to Canvas story. Mm-hmm. And even though a different writer did it, Rebecca and Rachel edited, and our copy editors looked at it too. That's going to be a big thing for us in the fall.
Right.
We as professors have got to train those of us who fell into Blackboard and continue to do so. Now we have to switch to Canvas, and this is just talking about that. And also the students have to switch. So for me, that's like one of the big stories that we have published this semester so far.
Right, and there with something new, when you're going from one learning management system that you've had for such a long time, switching over to a new one, it can be a little scary at first.
Yeah, I've done Blackboard here for 14 years.
Yeah.
I don't think I have another 14 years to give A-State to learn Canvas, but I'm going to try to do my best this summer.
Well, I will tell you, I've been on both, and you will like Canvas.
Oh,
It'll be
okay.
okay. It'll be all right, I
All
promise.
right, I'll come look for you if I
Yeah,
have problems.
do so, because I promise you, I've worked on it. You know, I have a class I'm teaching on it right now, and it's fine. So
Okay.
you'll definitely like it for sure. Going back to what we talked about earlier about papers, you said that the newspaper business is going into digital, and there's a lot of advantages to that, especially with breaking news coverage and all of that. But I know as long as you've worked in newspaper, there's just something about physically
Oh,
holding a
absolutely.
paper like that.
Absolutely.
What do you prefer, digital or
Oh,
paper?
I'm old school. I prefer paper. You know, I
Yeah.
like to write on it. I like to cut out articles. And in fact, I have the first byline article I had in 1974, working at the Florida Alligator. You know, and digital, there was no such thing. But I really like to write on the paper and cut things out and cut it out and send it to people. Now I take pictures on my phone and send it to Rebecca or to Jacob or to Rachel, you know, but I prefer paper.
What do you think, Rachel?
I mean, I agree with that. I do agree that digital is better for breaking news, but you know, with so many phone notifications I think that we get nowadays, people kind of tend to drown that out. And there's something to be said about seeing a paper, no notifications, nothing really attached to it that you can just pick up and read. There's something just tangible about it. And as an editor, it's really cool getting to see your work printed and as an actual thing that, you know, exists now. So I definitely am more of a paper fan, I'll say.
And I know that this can change probably from, you know, like before, like a lot of people, like my daughter, for example, who doesn't have any interest in going into that profession. You know, she sees things and it's just scrolling through, and you know, just like what a lot of people do. Have you been able to tell other students like yourself that, you know, hey, there's a value in actually being able to have something tangible like this in your hands as opposed to constantly scrolling on your phone?
I say absolutely. There's a value to it because it is. I mean, with the Herald specifically, it is all over campus, so you can find it anywhere that you want and know what's going on. So you're not really ignoring anything that you would on, like, you know, just scrolling through your phone. It's right there, and there's really not much to ignore.
With all of the things that are going on today, we're talking about different platforms and all the things like that. You said that newspapers are just changing. You know, they're changing with everything.
Mm-hmm.
How does media in general, including newspapers, stay relevant as we continue to go through the next 10, 15, 20 years?
I think the way they stay relevant is to correctly report and write information. That is the big difference in media as I see it. Now, the blogs are not what you're going to find in the Herald on a regular news story about Canvas and Blackboard. A blog is not what you're going to find in the state news in Michigan State University about what's going on in campus. And I guarantee that many people are not only picking up the state news this week more than usual, because that's where the first draft of history is for that shooting, unfortunately, but to also preserve and keep that information. For instance, if that had not been in print, then it would not be the history-making thing that it really is.
Right.
Or in the olden days, what Dewey beats Truman, you know, people got those kinds of newspapers up. When the Herald ran a story after the election of Donald Trump, Trump wins. Now, those are keepers, souvenirs.
Right. Right. It's definitely you know, groundbreaking history when you're talking about those things. So how do you, before we wrap this up today, Rachel, how do you work with new students, maybe students who are very new to the Herald, and kind of get them into the culture and getting them kind of used to the newsroom and how that works, the newsroom culture? Kind of tell us about that.
And I'll say, Rachel is a CMP major.
Fantastic.
She's not an MMJ major.
Fantastic.
So I can definitely relate, since I'm not a journalism major, I can relate to that, kind of feeling of foreignness that can kind of happen sometimes. And I think the biggest thing is doing the same approach that they did to me, just kind of easing you into it. I remember when I first started, they were like, we are just going to give you a nice kind of easier story, and you only have to do one a week. And I think just doing that with people going, okay, I will help you. Here's my number. Please text me. I will help you. And just kind of building up to more difficult things or more stories, whatever it might be. That kind of is how I get people used to it, and just, constantly trying to be like, I'm here for you. I'm an editor. That is my job.
And now you do up to 3 stories a week, right?
Yes,
Something
I
like
do.
that?
Sometimes even 4. It depends on what it is.
You look exhausted there, Sandra.
Yeah, she and Rachel exhaust me. In fact, I used to ask them, so what time, production night is Tuesday, so what time did you leave? And they say, you don't want to know. So it's like, okay.
Hey, nothing a little coffee addiction can't fix, so there you go.
Yeah, exactly. So do y'all have like a Keurig or something like that in the newsroom, where y'all need to get one probably,
So I think we've got a coffee pot. It's sitting on one of the copy editor's desks, I believe.
Okay.
So, yeah.
But they're specific about their coffee or Red Bull, so it wouldn't work.
Yeah, I understand. If students want to get more information about maybe how to get involved in the Herald, what would they need to do, Sandra?
Second floor, 224. We're there most of the time. If the reporters are in class or editors are in class, I'm usually there. So somebody's there. We can talk to them about it.
I appreciate you both for coming up, and also appreciate Rebecca for joining us as well, for telling us about the Herald and the great work you all are doing here on the A-State campus, keeping people informed about the things that are going on and that. So thank you all
We
for
try.
your work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, that'll do it for this edition of A-State Connections. I want to thank my guests, Sandra Combs, Rebecca Robinson, and Rachel Rudd. Also want to thank Instructor of Creative Media Production, Galen Perkins, and his amazing students who are always behind the scenes running the show, doing a fantastic job. Thanks to engineers Derek Herring and Clayton Holderfield for their help, and thank you for watching. And don't forget that A-State Connections is heard every Saturday morning at 11 on 91.9 FM KASU and streaming on the KASU mobile app. So long, everybody.